Good day, everyone. I hope you are all doing great today. My name is Kyla May G. Mojica from BSc 1-5, and I will discuss the social reality of crime and the left realism. Today's presentation, I tackle about the social reality of crime, the class struggle and class conflict formulation and definition of crime, application of the definition of crime, construction of the ideology of crime, development of behavior patterns in relation to definition of crime, and the left realism. What is the left realism and reasons for crime? When you hear the word crime, what was the first thing that comes to your mind? There is probably no more frightening word in our daily vocabulary than crime, especially if it appears in the phrase crime in the streets. The very mention of the word strikes terror in the hearts of all good citizens and evokes endless rhetoric and political bell ringing from elected officials. But just what is crime? What is crime? In general terms, a crime is an illegal act for which someone can be punished by the government, especially a gross violation of the law. In sociology, a normative definition views crime as deviant behavior that violates prevailing norms or cultural standards prescribing how humans ought to behave normally. Professor Queenie explains the formulation of criminal definition, or what we lawyers would refer to as the development of the criminal law as a function of power in society. Those segments of the society that have the power to translate their interests into public policy regulate the formulation of criminal law. Who is Professor Richard Queenie? He theorized the social reality of crime in 1970. His early work examined the different official treatment of white-collar criminals and street criminals, or see white-collar crime. He generalized this concern in a theory of conflict that attempted to explain why some acts are defined and prosecuted as criminal whereas others are not. The social reality of crime 1970, for example, he concluded that public conception of crime are constructed in the political arena to serve political purposes. He is born May 16, 1934. Elkhorn, Wisconsin, U.S. American philosopher and criminologist known for his critical philosophical approach to criminal justice research. Queenie followed as a Marxist approach in citing social inequities as the root of crime. Criminal behavior asserted it is a natural occurrence in a society that favors the wealthy over the poor and the powerful over the weak. The social reality of crime. Richard Queen's The Social Reality of Crime remains an eloquent and important statement on criminal law and justice. At the time of its appearance in 1970, Queen's jury not only liberated the field from irritation of the practices of the police, courts, and correction, it also presented a marked departure from traditional analysis which view criminal behavior as pathological. Queenie not only advanced criminological thought, he inspired scores of students of crime and criminal justice to reorient their perception of the justice system. The social reality of crime swept the criminology community and motivated an entire generation of researchers to question definition of crime and labels of criminality. And these are the following some terminologies used in Professor Queenie's book on criminology. Class struggle and class conflict. It is important to recognize the Marx view, the structure of society in relation to its major classes, and the struggle between them as the engine of change in this structure. The key to understanding Marx is his class definition. A class is defined as the ownership of property. Such ownership vests a person the power to exclude others from the property to use it for personal purposes. Overall, there are 6 elements in Marx's view of class conflict. One is classes are authority relationship based on property ownership. Two, a class defines groupings of individuals with shared life situation thus interest. Three, classes are naturally antagonistic by virtue of their interests. Four, imminent within modern society in the growth of two antagonistic classes and their struggle which eventually absorbs all social relations. 5. Political organization and power is an instrumentality of class struggle and reigning ideas of its reflection. 6. Structural change is a consequence of the class struggle. Formulation and definition of crime. In a number of countries, we find new criminal codes expressed in the broadest possible terms on constructed on sweeping action of social defense. Criminal behavior is accordingly any antisocial conduct and actual administration. Antisocial becomes any conduct that runs counter in the politics of the regime. The meaning of criminal is thus determined by authority by force. Criminologist Paul Tarpan defines crime as intentional act or omission in violation of criminal law committed without defense or justification and sanctioned by the state as a felony or misdemeanor. Possible punishment determine the differences between misdemeanors and felonies. Application of crime, definition of crime. According to the social reality of crime, definition of crime are applied by the class that has the power to shape the enforcement and administration of the law. Classes, status groups, parties are considered by Weber to associated with power attempting to achieve one's will, even in the face of opposition from others. Weber argues that status honor is a more important source of group social action that is class relation to market. Status groups can do this various ways. Construction of the ideology of crime. According to Professor Queenie, an ideology of crime is constructed and diffused by the dominant class to secure its hegemony. There are some crime ideologies described by Niels Gerberg. First is penal ideology. A penal or criminal law ideology is a basic conception of crime and or punishment. Second, primitive conception. Historically, the type of organization and power supremacy needed for the institution of state punishment was thus realized comparatively late. Punishment was practiced and developed within fairly small units, the family and the tribe, the band, the horde, the troop, the army, whatever the reason for considering an act or mission to be wrong. Punishment was the reward of disobedience or disobordination or defiance or rebellion. The offense was then directed against an individual in a position of power of authority. Let us call him the ruler. In practice, the individual often also was legislator. The former misconception. If we take the prince-subject relation as one marginal case of legal subordination, the opposite marginal case should be characterized as the authority of the law. Within its or personal territorial scope of validity, it's of course possible to construct a serious intermediate step of making the authority involved less and less individual, more abstract. The first step has already been indicated. The role changes from the natural or supernatural person. When the state takes over that supreme position, it often seen as something like person or organism. But such ideas are now abandoned. Although the law is an expression of state power, in the last stage, the now very abstract state withdraws into the background, and the norm order itself captures the scene. First, when the legislative rule and the place by the law, disobedience is no longer the more appropriate word for the attitude connected with other crime. The term indifference or repudiation is more apt to convey what is involved. The offender is no longer disturbing someone's peace. He is disturbing the law's peace. For its radical conception, common to the primitive and the former conception is that a crime involves a specific type of attitude. A possible source of misunderstanding is that indifference to the values embodied interests protected in the legal norm order can be interpreted in two ways. Indifference to the specific values interests evaded threaded in the content case, and indifference to the legal norm or order such as entity. Development of behavior patterns in relation to definition of crime. People construct their own patterns of action in participating with others. The probability the person will develop action patterns in a high potential for being defined as criminal depends on a structured opportunity, social media mobilization, learning experiences, social media, interpersonal association, and identification, usually university student, and self-conception, values, beliefs throughout the experiences which each person creates a conception of self as a human social being. Left realism. What is left realism? Left realism is just one political ideology that focuses on the causes of crime and deviance. Left realists believe that living in capitalistic society as in society where private entities control trade industry instead of the state is the main cause of crime. In a capitalistic society, there is cultural inclusion, meaning that everyone who lives within this society can pursue the ideas and concepts under capitalism. Reasons for crime under left realism. There are three major reasons for people to commit crime: the relative deprivation, marginalization, and subculture. Relative deprivation. The rise of social media has made this factor the frontrunner or developing a criminal perspective. According to this idea, more people are exposed to advertising and consumerist propaganda, and at the same time, they are not continually exposed to how much they don't have or can acquire by seeing all things everybody else does. This constant bombardment of the attainable is economic exclusion. Marginalization. Essentially, this is what happens when groups and demographics of people are left without feeling like they have a voice. Consider the Black Lives Matter movement. There was started because African Americans felt that were not being treated as fairly as whites by the police force across the United States. Subculture. This is an acceptance of resorting to illegal means of to attain desired theft. Drug dealing and robbery all become way of life, and some of the communities are suffering from economic exclusion. And these are the references. This is the end of my report. Thank you.